7 winters ago, my mother Alice was running out of options. So she moved hundreds of miles north from around New York City, her lifelong home, to live with us in the Vermont woods. She hated snow. I was the daughter who got on her nerves. The feeling was mutual. So you might be wondering what made me think it was a good idea to have Alice move in with us just as our nest was about to empty. Obviously we weren't close, and it wasn't like I had a lot of free time and energy on my hands. In fact, I was a bitter medical anthropologist when Alice moved in. Exhausted by years of hard work in a college of medicine, I was the professor responsible for incorporating culture, diversity, humanism, teamwork, professionalism, death and dying, the soft stuff, into the required curriculum. So the last thing I needed was another hard job. Enter my mother. I was sitting in my office, getting ready to give a lecture, when the phone rang. It was the lawyer from my mother's New York co-op apartment calling me to say that, considering the kitchen fire, that the co-op was requiring round-the-clock help. It was the first that I heard of the fire, but it made sense. A few weeks earlier, I'd been troubled by the state of her home when I drove down to visit. Always immaculate and welcoming before, on that hot August day, the air conditioning unit sat on the floor in front of windows shut tight, and the apartment was stifling and dirty. So I put the units back in and I cleaned, but she couldn't explain. Alice forgot the fire department coming and removing the units in order for the smoke to clear. So we set up round-the-clock care, but she hated it. "They follow me around like the Gestapo," she said. A proud, hard-working career woman, she had done all the cooking and cleaning for her family of 5 without any outside help. So next we tried an apartment without a kitchen in a nearby senior living community. But after Alice kept trying to walk home, they said her only option with them was the lockdown Aliceheimer's unit. That's how she came to live with us. First she lost her kitchen, then her own home. Alice was disappearing. Frequently, the internal governor of someone with dementia also disappears. They say exactly what's on their minds, but this disappearance let Alice find parts of herself that she had kept hidden, from her children anyway. She wished out loud that she had gone to medical school, and the years of her pushing me in that direction, I got a little bit close to it, and away from creative work, made sense at last. And when she stood in my kitchen, admiring the cabinet knobs I had hand-painted, and said, "You should quit your job and make art full-time," her loss was my gain. Aliceheimer's. So after a few months of trying to balance the home agency, my teaching work, and everything else going on at home, I followed Alice's advice, took a leave of absence from the university, started making comics, and now I'm here. So, story. We connect through story, we remember through story, we think through story. But for most of us, stories are made of words. Think back to your earliest memories. For a moment, be like someone with dementia holding on only to those oldest memories. Most of them are visual. In each of our lives, we could see long before we could speak. Did you know that at birth, our eyes can focus only 6 to 8 inches, just the distance between the faces of an infant and her mother? Over the coming weeks, the rest of the world comes into focus, but it's months before words, years before paragraphs, and many years before paragraphs get concatenated into story. We also could speak long before we could, or see long before we could speak from an evolutionary perspective. In fact, we even lost some of our visual capacities in the left sides of our brains in order to make space for language. And the oldest stories come down to us through pictures that are tens of thousands of years old. And even the earliest languages are pictorial. Not to mention the hallowed tradition of illuminated manuscript. But despite all this, comics, graphic narratives, bande dessinée, sequential art, whatever you want to call it, is generally considered a lower status form of storytelling. And that might be because comics remind us of something deep inside ourselves that we've forgotten. I found the voice for our story the day I cut up a cheap paperback copy of Alice in Wonderland to make my mother's bathrobe. When she lived with us, every day started like this: time to get dressed. Oh, no, I'm very comfortable. It was only after drawing this picture in its entirety, though, that I realized that the halos that I'd drawn around Alice's head were reminiscent of Armenian manuscripts, a subconscious reference to her first language, to her reversion to childhood, and to her altered magical state. Pictures tap into subconscious processes for both the composer and the reader, and this gives graphic storytelling power to support those with dementia and their caregivers, and power to change the dominant narrative. We need these stories to be as good as they can be. We need to all heal from dementia, and healing is not the same as curing a disease. Healing doesn't take place inside of one person's body. It doesn't involve surgery or taking a pill. That social process depends upon sharing our stories with others and letting our collective memories meet. And by meeting through story, we make peace and we move on, even if we're sick or hurt or dying. Now, watching my mother Alice, when she lived with us, eat up every single graphic narrative that came into the house, from Alison Bechdel's The Fun Home, to Robot Dreams, to Persepolis, to Mouse, made me certain that I wanted to use comics to tell our story. I wanted a medium that someone with dementia could access. The visual-verbal combination makes up for some of the memory loss and lets content stay sophisticated. And people with dementia are very sophisticated. They just can't remember things. And imagine trying to function without your short-term memory. We also need comics because subconsciously we associate comics with laughter, and all of us need permission to laugh at this experience. Laughter is respite. It gives us new ideas for how to cope. And this isn't something that I thought up or I read in a book, Caregiving for Dummies or something like that. This is something that I learned right from my mother early in Alzheimer's, one May morning when she stood by my dining room windows looking out over the rolling fields, and she sang this bit from Rodgers and Hart's Babes in Arms. It seems we stood and talked like this before. We looked at each other in the same way then, but I can't remember where or when. The clothes you are wearing are the clothes you wore. The smile you were smiling then, but I can't remember where or when. And then she stopped and she smiled and she said, that should be the Alzheimer's theme song. Aliceheimer's. So Alice set the tone. And that way, when she said to me, it's a good thing I ran into you in the parking lot. I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't. I knew what she meant. And when she said to me, Dana, why are you so good to me? I knew how to answer. I was standing behind her at the dressing table, brushing her hair. Our eyes met in the three-part mirror that had stood like a folded screen on the table for as long as I could remember. Because you're my mother. Big, pregnant pause. I'm your mother? Who's your daddy? Alice turned to face me. You were married to Dave, you had 3 kids, Mark's the oldest, then me, Susie's the youngest. Ah, yes, I remember. Alice turned back. I kept brushing, watching her in the mirror. Alice looked up and found my eyes and said, I wasn't very good to you. I'm sorry. Unfinished business. I now know that was why she was there living with us, but I never imagined I would hear these words stated so simply. Thanks. So you forgive me? Of course. Because you did the best you could. But I knew that if I wanted it, Alzheimer's would let us have this conversation every single day. But forgiveness is also action, action that lets us redo the past. I wanted to stand at that same dressing table and brush her hair without yanking. I wanted to listen to her as she spoke about her day. I wanted to guide her through uncharted territory. I wanted to face sickness of the mental sort straight on instead of sweeping it under the rug. The rhythm of the brush soothed us both. And when I set the brush back down on the dressing table, to the bowl overflowing with the beads that Alice loved to wear, she turned to face me again and said, "Running a hotel must be very hard." Aliceheimer's. So dementia gave us new ways to meet, to learn each other's stories, to write new ones, and to heal. And this is the story that comics can tell. And it's not just the usual dementia story. You know the one. It's the zombie story. Bodies living without minds, whose loved ones struggle with heartbreaking loss as they wait for valiant researchers to find the cure. Of course there's loss. But if we reframe dementia as a diversity issue, as a different way of being, as a window into another reality, then people living in that state can be our teachers, useful, true humans who contribute to the common good instead of scary zombies. Now, if you believe the way Alice did, that science is the only way to understand sickness and health, then finding the good in dementia or any incurable sickness is pretty uncomfortable. But for anthropologists, medicine is a lot more than sickness. It's than science, rather. It's a system of beliefs and practices. And while biomedicine can cure some diseases and sometimes repair our bodies, it flounders with permanent hurts, troubles of the mind, states present from birth, or that are incapacitating, messy, and eventually lead to death. These states are stigmatized and feared, and medical anthropologists have a $12 word for that. It's called social death. We're all familiar with biological notions of birth and death, emergence from the womb, or that last beat of the heart or the final breath. But every society also defines when life begins and ends, when personhood is conferred or taken away. So when my Armenian ancestors go to the grave of someone who's died recently to offer them food, it's because social death hasn't happened yet. Stigma, silence, and social death surround rejected ways of being, like dementia. And this rejection echoes through the hallways of hospitals and schools and grocery stores. And this is where comics come in. They can rewrite the rejection story. Alice wrote new stories every day. Some of her stories featured pirates with a dashing Johnny Deppness. Alice always returned from the ship or the island famished but content. I like these pirates. Stories can also show us that hallucinations aren't just something to medicate away. They're a language that we can learn to decipher. Like when Alice showed me she had something tough she needed to talk about by saying, "Dana, can you come here? I think I grew hooves and horns." Stories can be kinder. They can be about desire, like when my mother saw my dead father in the branches of the maple trees surrounding our farmhouse. Stories let us take biological death straight on, the way Alice did. And that can only lessen the suffering from social death. Alice practiced dying on a regular basis. Get a shower curtain or something for me, would you? I don't want to make a mess. In the middle of dementia, she retained that bit of scientific knowledge that our bodies let go when we take that last breath. Rehearsal usually happened around sunset. I would sit with her and my dead father and her parents hovering in the air around us. Alice took tiny steps toward them, then back towards me, our own lobster quadrille, just like Griffin and Mock Turtle in Alice in Wonderland. She was truly in between, liminal, as in a rite of passage, transcending two worlds, though physiologically she had no signs that biological death was nigh. Will you, won't you, will you, won't you, will you join the dance? In the middle of Alzheimer's disease, Alice knew we needed to practice because our medical system equates death with treatment failure. Doctors hand off the death to a different kind of expert, the priest, the funeral home director. And when death is feared and mind problems stigmatized, oh boy, does a social death also accompany Alzheimer's disease. I knew this, that when Alice left us to go to the memory care, to the lockdown unit, that we'd be hastening that death. Would not, could not join the dance. But when the time came, the transition was okay because we had rehearsed. A few days before Alice moved, she gave us a story to explain the transition to others. I just tucked her in and had gone down the hall to my room when I heard her calling, "Lady, lady, lady!" I ran back, opened the door. "What's up?" "I just wanted to know your name." "Dana." "Pretty name. Thanks, you gave it to me." "And you mean if I just call, you'll come?" "I promise you that if you call, it might not be me, but someone nice will come." "Oh, good, thank you. I'll sleep well knowing that." "Will you, won't you, won't you join the dance?" Aliceheimer's. So dementia gave us a gift. It let us understand each other's actions and intentions and cores, and this is worth so much more than being on a first-name basis. So now, when I visit Alice in memory care and she says to me, "You know, you must have been a cute little kid. I wish I had known you then," I can say, "You too." So let's use comics to rewrite all sorts of medical stories. Comics bring us back to a time when we could communicate and give and receive stories through the looks in each other's eyes, through touch, through facial expressions, actions, and gestures. I dream that each of you will pick up your pens and draw your stories. And when you do, find those hidden gifts, use the magic, rehearse, live and draw the story that you see here. And remember that by showing the faces and the daily reality of someone with dementia or any other different way of being, you remove stigma and you restore humanity. Comics let us see the world through the eyes of others, those who are hurting, and to feel their stories and to remember our own, and to heal, and to fly over the world as Alice does. Thank you.